This is the Resistance Report for June 14th, 2017. The theme tonight, violence and nonviolence in American politics. I remember when I was a kid, 20 years old, and in Washington for my first job, interning for Senator Robert F. Kennedy. One of the highlights of that summer was the annual congressional baseball game in which Democrats and Republicans squared off against each other. Each side, I remember, wearing their home state sports uniform. It was a balmy evening, great fun. And it was the kind of event that enabled all of us, whether we were working for the Democrats or the Republicans, to enjoy ourselves and enjoy the company of the other side. It's been going on since 1909. It's a tradition. This morning, as Republicans met at Eugene Simpson Stadium Park in Alexandria, Virginia, for their final practice before Thursday night's scheduled game at Nationals Park, a gunman with a rifle opened fire, injuring several people, including Steve Scalise, the majority whip, and several congressional aides. Scalise remains in critical condition. Our prayers and our thoughts are with him and others who were injured and their families. Now, whatever the motive of the shooter, some Republicans are saying today that in the era of Trump, they, Republicans, are being threatened as never before. They point to a virulent backlash against Trump that they say is going beyond the bounds of reasonable dissent. And that subtly or not, they say the backlash is encouraging violence. Donald Trump Jr. is among those arguing that, as he puts it, liberal hate speech is leading to violence. Today, Donald Trump Jr. tweeted support for a comment by conservative political consultant Harlan Hill. And the comment was, quote, "Events like today are exactly why we took issue with New York elites glorifying the assassination of our president," unquote. Now, Hill was referring to a New York City production of Julius Caesar that portrays the assassination of Julius Caesar looking like Donald Trump in a business suit. Now, that came on the heels of comedian Kathy Griffin posing with a bloodied rendering of Donald Trump's head. Meanwhile, lawyers, and I'm talking about particularly Republican lawyers, Republican members of Congress, have had town halls that are rowdy, overflowing, bordering, they say, sometimes on being dangerous. Representative David Bratt from Virginia says town halls now often include 1,000 people screaming, and it takes only one person off the reservation to cause a problem. I just want to make sure we all are on the same page here. Democrats are experiencing the same level of hatred as Republicans, and there are way too many invitations to violence on both sides. A few weeks ago, on the eve of his election to the House of Representatives, Montana Republican Greg Gianforte beat up Ben Jacobs, a reporter for the Guardian newspaper. This spring, here in my hometown, Berkeley, California, we had people coming in from both sides of the political extremes. One side calling the other side fascists, the other side supporting Trump signs and calling the others communists. They came to battle. They came armored with homemade weapons. A lot of people were hurt. Last year, Donald Trump said of a protester at one of his campaign rallies, "I'd like to punch him in the face. In the old days, protesters would be carried out on stretchers." There's absolutely no excuse for fomenting violence. There is no excuse for political violence. There's no excuse for violence of this sort in our country, in our culture, in our democracy. I'm not blaming the president, obviously, but Donald Trump does set a tone. You remember when he said Hillary wants to essentially abolish the Second Amendment. By the way, if she gets to pick her judges, nothing you can do, folks, although the Second Amendment people, maybe there is. I don't know. It is vitally important that we all understand we are in this together. Stop it. We don't settle anything with violence. Violence of any kind is totally unacceptable in our society. Real social and political change is achievable. And we know this from the civil rights movement, from the women's rights, from gay rights, from conservative movements. We know that real social and political change is achievable only through non-violent action. Our democracy depends on discussion and on debate and on compromise and on respect. People can be angry with each other. We are very angry with each other, but we are all Americans. We care about this country. We need each other. We are dependent on each other. Which gets back to the core of our politics. And the core of the actual practice of politics is occurring on Capitol Hill right now. And let's not forget and keep our eyes on exactly what is happening. Trump told GOP senators who are now working on their own version of a bill to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, he said that the Hill version that the House Democrats didn't want, that House Republicans came up with, is a mean version. He criticized the House Republicans. He said it must be made more generous. Now, obviously, House Republicans are furious with Donald Trump because they stuck out their necks, making the case for their bill, even choosing to vote on it before the Congressional Budget Office came out with its report showing that 23 million Americans would lose their health insurance if it went into effect. So it seems like the strategy that Trump and Senate Republicans are using is to make the public think that the Senate version, when it comes out, will be kinder and gentler. Now, maybe Senate Republicans will phase out Medicaid more slowly. Maybe they will continue to protect people with pre-existing conditions, but allow for much skimpier health care plans. So even though you're protected with a pre-existing condition, you're not protected all that much. But you know, here's the thing. Because their central aim, Republicans in the Senate, like Republicans in the House, their central aim is to repeal the taxes that financed and have supported the Affordable Care Act. And also to get rid of the mandate that requires younger and healthier people to get insurance. Because that is what they have set out to do. They are not going to have the finances to do much, even if they call it kinder and gentler than the House version. And by comparison to the House version, it will probably be kinder and gentler, but it's still going to be incredibly harsh. If you don't have the taxes to finance it, if you don't have the mandate for younger and healthier people to get health insurance, it is bound to cause millions, if not tens of millions of people to lose their health insurance. And by the way, it is a completely stealth operation. It is impossible to find out what the Senate Republicans are working on. We know they're working on something right now because they've got till July 4th, They've got to vote on it. They've got to schedule a vote in the Senate. But there have been no hearings. And Senate Republicans say they're not going to release the Senate version until close to the time of the vote in order to minimize criticism, in order to minimize the opportunity to actually oppose what they are doing. Now, this connects to what I was saying before about nonviolence. It is critically important that all of us continue the fight, the nonviolent fight, mobilizing and organizing and energizing those around us to make sure that we have a healthcare system that protects people, to make sure that we get big money out of politics, to fight for Medicare for all, to fight against some of the anti-democratic, small d, unconstitutional things that Donald Trump is pushing. But by fighting, we're talking about civil disobedience, discussion, debate. Yes, by all means, go to town meetings. By all means, raise your voice. By all means, make a ruckus about what the Republicans are doing. But it is vitally important that we maintain civility. Your questions. Denise Dengala Nora, what can we do to demand that the Senate open the floor for debating the health care bill? Denise, the only people who are going to be able to make that demand on your behalf, on my behalf, are Senate Democrats. Make sure you contact today, tomorrow, as soon as you can, your two senators. If one of them is or two of them are Democrats, so much the better. If your senators are Republican or one of them is a Republican, make your voice heard as well. But the thing is, there has to be a showdown on the floor in the Senate in which Democrats say, essentially, point of order, we have got to see this bill, and the public has got to see this bill long before it is voted on. If there are no debates, if there are no hearings, if there is no public understanding of this, if there's no coverage of it, it is critically important that there be public understanding. Jacob Aguado, do you think Jeff Sessions will resign soon, you ask? Jacob, I think that there is a good chance that Jeff Sessions is going to resign. Why do I say that? Because Donald Trump has undercut Jeff Sessions every chance Donald Trump has. And Donald Trump is still furious that Sessions has recused himself from the FBI investigation, thereby clearing the way for Robert Mueller to have the status of special counsel. It grates on Donald Trump, and Donald Trump complains to almost everybody he sees about this. Obviously, that message is getting through to Jeff Sessions. I think if Jeff Sessions has one iota of integrity, he's going to resign. Jane Frederick, please explain how you envision the workings of a single-payer plan and how insurance companies would fit into it. Jane, it's very, very simple. And if you build on the Medicare model, it's even simpler. I mean, what do we have? Medicare and Social Security, they're both based on payroll taxes. If we have Medicare for all, we have a system in which the payroll tax is raised in a progressive way. That is, the rich pay more proportionally than anybody else. And that means we all save money, because even though we pay more in payroll taxes, we save in terms of our health insurance and health care bills. That's what the experience is in every other advanced country that has anything resembling a single-payer plan. The reason we save money is because we don't have all those administrative costs. We don't have all the marketing costs of private for-profit insurers. We don't pay the CEOs and the top executives. We also don't have to make sure that shareholders are happy. Those are huge savings. We don't have the administrative costs. We know there have been a number of studies that show that Medicare's administrative costs are a fraction of private for-profit health insurers' costs. And those savings are much greater than the increase in payroll taxes. Two more questions. Lori Powell, why aren't we hearing any news about the case against DNC and Wasserman Schultz? Lori, I think that when we don't hear news about a case, it's usually because the case is moving slowly before the federal courts. That would be my guess. Lexi Deb LS, if that's your name. How do we effectively fight the Trump regime and simultaneously work toward what we are for, not just what we are against? Lexi, you're raising a critical issue here. We can't be just against Trump. And we can't be just Democrats, capital D. We have to be Republicans and Democrats and independents. And what we have to be against is not only the beginnings of tyranny that the Trump administration in so many respects represents, but we've got to be for things like sensible Medicare for all, environmental protection, the Paris Accord, a larger and more robust earned income tax credit, which is a wage subsidy for the poor. We've got to make sure that we have strong civil rights enforcement and we don't go after small infractions of the law and end up locking away in prison huge numbers of Americans, costing us all dearly and creating a climate of fear, especially in minority communities, the militarization of the police. There are a lot of people that agree with these sorts of principles. We can have a tax system that is fair. We can get big money out of politics. We can do all of this because we've done it before. We don't do it permanently. It has to, and we have to, maintain vigilance. But we periodically do it. We did it after the Gilded Age, when we had huge wealth and huge poverty and a shrinking middle class and huge amounts of corruption, where the lackeys of the robber barons used to actually put sacks of money down on the desks of pliant legislators. Well, what happened was we had a great reaction against that, a progressive era. Teddy Roosevelt fighting Bob La Follette. All of those progressive heroes of America who in the first decades of the 20th century, and then really throughout the FDR administration, put into reforms that changed America for the good. We can do that again. We will do that again, but it requires a huge amount of work. And you're right. It does require a positive agenda, not just fighting Trump. We come to the end of tonight's Resistance Report. I want to once again thank our producer, Yael Bridge, and our associate producer, Sasha Lightman. I want to thank you for everything that you are doing, all of the work you are doing. I hope you will continue to do the work you are doing, organizing and mobilizing and energizing, working in your indivisibleguide.com groups, working at the grassroots, making sure that we are ready, you are ready for the 2018, next year's midterm elections, doing what you can at the state level to promote an agenda that helps all Americans, for the many, not for the few. I'll see you soon.